Neighboring. I love it.
All right, great.
Okay.
I love making up words.
You know, you learn so much here at the BC Natural Resources Forum, eh? We've got haiku, we've got limericks, and now my word of the day, neighboring. Thank you, panel. All right, we're going to jump right in to our next panel on mining, permitting for sustainable development. May I ask Jennifer Hooper, Indigenous Relations Leader, WSP Canada, to please come forward and introduce our next panel. And if the panelists are in the house, and I know they are, coming? Oh, right here. Okay, well, let's bring our panel right on up, and then we'll ask Jennifer to introduce them. Michael and friends, we call it for short. Nalaine, how are you? Good to see you again. Make yourself. Good to meet you. Thanks, lads. Get comfortable. Perfect. What's that, Frank? Oh, thank you. Please give a warm BC Natural Resources Forum to Jennifer Hooper, Indigenous Relations Leader, WSP Canada. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Good morning. I acknowledge that we're meeting today on the traditional territory of the Klay people, and I thank the peoples of the Klay for welcoming us and allowing us to gather for this meeting and learn about our natural resources in this province. It's my pleasure to be here today representing WSP, a company that has been heavily involved in the mining industry in Canada for decades, providing concept to completion services for sites across Canada and around the world. It's never been, so there's never been a time in our history when the mining sector has been as prominent in our economy, our economic future, as it is today. And at the same time, there's never been a time when the mining industry is under the microscope as it is today. From the need to create strong partnerships with local communities and to the demand for heightened environmental responsibility, at every stage of mine development, mining companies face more scrutiny than ever before. On a personal note, as a member of the Tahltan First Nation, mining is a key driver for our nation's economy. And it's even more important than the economic benefits that come into the community are the responsible mining practices. I'm excited to listen to the upcoming discussion, Mining Permitting for Sustainable Development, as these experts discuss how the government structure can lead to the long-term responsible extraction of the critical minerals needed for our net zero economy. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. And I will turn it over to Michael Goehring, Moderator and President of the Mining Association of BC.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Michael Goehring, President and CEO of the Mining Association of BC, and it's my pleasure to moderate the mining panel on permitting for sustainable development. And it's a pleasure to be here on the traditional unceded territory of the Klay First Nation. And this morning, we have a really great platform to dig into the current state of play in mine permitting. Challenges, how to speed and improve permitting, perhaps, including permitting for more responsible development. We're fortunate we have 3 permitting and regulatory pros who can draw insight from 3 different projects that are at different stages of development. And to round out the discussion, we have the Deputy Minister responsible for mining, who obviously brings a unique perspective to the mix. So joining us today, on my left, Ryan Todd, Vice President, Environment and Social Responsibility, Artemis Gold. Nalaine Morin, Vice President, Sustainability, Skeena Resources. Francois Venzina, Senior VP, Project Development, Technical Services and Environment with Osisko. And Shannon Baskerville, Deputy Minister, BC Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. So for today's session, and I'm going to try and run this as tight as possible, each panelist will make a brief opening remarks, and then we'll transition to a Q&A, and then we'll close with a quick, everyone will provide a quick summation of their points. Audience, if you have any questions, Huva, please, you know what to do there. And I'll make just a couple of brief remarks to frame up our discussion before we get into the introductory comments. So it's definitely, if you're in the natural resource industry, you have to have living under a rock not to know that permitting has been a challenge. Let's call it a long game, and perhaps too long. It's challenging and it's complicated. There's issues around process predictability, some procedural aspects of decision making, challenges with coordination, communication within agencies, between different levels of government. Importantly, there's also the Crown's duty to consult and accommodate, recent requirements for FPIC with the Declaration Act, and the move towards consent-based shared decision-making. Moreover, there's health, safety, and environmental protection, which is really the point of good permitting. And our current focus today is about being able to permit and authorize new innovations and techniques in a timely way to enhance the protection of water, land, fish, and wildlife, so we can mine more responsibly. So fortunately, both levels of government, British Columbia and Canada, have acknowledged, both in word and deed, that they're committed to tackling permitting and speeding timelines for major mine projects. And there has been progress. In BC, the Premier mentioned Tuesday night, there has been progress on regional mine permit timelines. And for larger operating mines, the departure for approval process has been revised, and it's led to some good outcomes. But some of these big solutions remain elusive, and perhaps it depends on what your expectation is. Some might say there is no silver bullet. Others say we have to be satisfied with incremental improvements. But clearly, we do need to find a solution to speed permitting and authorizations for mines. And this, Stephen Dean made a comment Tuesday night that I thought was striking, and it made me think about, like, what's this all about? And when he shared that 20% of Blackwater's workforce is women and 30% is Indigenous. And I thought, like, that's why we're here, right? To provide the products the world needs and grow our economy. So when we're talking about permitting, we're talking about people and unlocking the opportunities for people that responsible mining offers. So along with the minerals and metals the world needs, each new mine offers new opportunities for high-paying jobs, good secure employment, healthy communities, partnerships, prosperity, self-determination. And those benefits move on through the supply chain. So the longer it takes to permit a mine, the longer it takes to realize these benefits. So there is urgency. So with that, I'll turn it over to our panelists for the opening remarks. We'll start with Ryan, and then we will move down the row to Nalaine, Francois, and Shannon. Ryan? Great.
Thank you, Michael. Maybe before I speak on Blackwater specifically, I'll just take a second to acknowledge and thank the Tlekley Tene Nation for welcoming us to the territory, as well as our conference organizers for putting on such a great conference again this year. So thank you. Turning to Blackwater, for those of you who aren't aware, Blackwater is a open pit gold silver mine that's currently in construction. We're located about 150 kilometers to the southwest of here, about 100 odd kilometers south of the community of Vanderhoof, a community that's supported us immensely over the years, and we're thankful for that. The mine site where we're actively building now, excuse me, is located in the traditional territories of the Luskus Dene and Olgacho First Nations. We're joined here today by Ogacho member Alicia Knapp, Director Natural Resources, as well as virtually by Councillor Pamela Garner. Additional infrastructure for the mine is located in the traditional territories of the Stalaten, Nadli-Wuten, and Saikas, along with the Nazco First Nations. We view all of those nations as our partners in project development and are thankful for the relationships we have with those nations. I guess turning to the project more specifically itself, I'd mentioned it's a gold-silver mine. We're actively constructing. We plan to be pouring our first gold in the second half of this year. We've got approximately 500 people, well, in excess of 500 people working on the mine currently. 300 plus of those are direct employees to the company, Blackwater Gold. Michael, you stole a little bit of my thunder, but I was going to reiterate a couple of Stephen's facts from the other night, that we have approximately 30% Indigenous employment out there and approximately 20% women employment. We've also have got 50% of our workforce from the local, actually I should say the regional area, and 80% from British Columbia. So numbers that we're truly proud of for Blackwater, and we've worked hard to get to those numbers. We're a company with a strong commitment to responsible development. We have a vision to develop Blackwater as a project that's got a very low carbon footprint. We've made significant investments as a company to build we're actively building a transmission line to tie ourselves into clean BC hydropower to power infrastructure out at site. We have a vision to have a mill that is a zero emissions mill out of Blackwater, which is truly unique for the gold space. Emissions when I say from a carbon perspective, and we've entered into opportunities with Caterpillar to further decarbonize the mine site by way of acquiring or potentially acquiring in the future electrified haul trucks. So something we're turning our mind to is certainly that carbon aspect of the build, and also turning our mind to what we can do in future to further decarbonize the mine. We expect to be in the lower quartile in terms of our peers for greenhouse gas emissions. Other ESG commitments that we're particularly proud of for the project are our commitments in the biodiversity space, caribou offsetting, wetlands offsetting, fish offsetting as well. Some very novel approaches that have been taken in those areas, and certainly areas that we're very proud of. Maybe just turning to permitting before I pass it over to Nalaine, because I believe that's what we're meant to be talking about today. Is that right? Yeah. You know, I guess an observation of mine in the several years I've been working in the permitting space, I guess 20 years now, and 12 years of which has been on Blackwater, is a market shift away from the sort of transactional consultation that we used to undertake when we were acquiring permits, you know, in the start of my career, to much more of that deeper collaboration that we're all committed to now. Consent-based decision-making, as Michael, you were mentioning, and really true meaningful partnerships. I would say that my experience on Blackwater has been, you know, certainly in the more recent years as we've gone through the permitting, that is those deep collaborative approaches have led to some of the most robust outcomes in terms of novel and advanced, say, ESG type initiatives. Our Caribou Plan would be one example of that. And I would say that it's those outcomes that are really truly novel and unique that have led to the support that we enjoy for the project and our ability to acquire the permits on the timelines that we have. So it's really been that sort of rolling up our sleeves and digging into things alongside of our partners that have led to the successes that we've had. With that, I'll maybe pause and turn it back to you or over to Nalaine.
Chocholone Hotia, Nalaine Morin, Oshia. My name's Nalaine Morin. I said good morning in Tahltan. Not a fluent Tahltan speaker, but it's certainly something that I hope to achieve someday in the work that I do. And I find having the opportunity to speak my language out loud certainly grounds me. And in the conversation that we're having today about activities that are happening on Tahltan territory, we need that foundation and that strength. So I would like to start there, as well as to say I also acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh. And in the time that I've worked in industry, and in the mining industry in particular, I certainly have seen a significant change in the efforts that are being made between industry, government, and First Nations towards collaboration and partnership. I currently work for Skeena Resources. We are working on the revitalization, the Eskay Creek revitalization project. It's funny, the old Eskay Creek project was an underground gold mine and one of the richest gold mines in the world. And I know that we have, a number of folks that, can reflect on the experiences there. I myself have a similar story. My dad was a millwright, and he actually built the mill at the original Eskay Creek project and took it down when it closed, right? So to have the opportunity to see that vision, to rebuild this operation, to build something new there, is an exciting time for us. We currently are in the environmental assessment process, hoping to file our application in June of this year. And the process that we find ourselves in, similar to my colleagues here on the stage, are, we get the opportunity to work with many nations. I myself, with this project, will work with Tahltan, as the project is on Tahltan territory. But in looking at, our transportation corridor route, we also get to work with Nisga'a, Gitnao, and Skeena, to name a few. And one of the things that, has certainly changed in the environmental assessment is now we are seeing nations have a much stronger voice. And we're seeing that reflected in the decision-making that we're seeing on these projects today. So with regards to the Eskay Creek revitalization project, we're actually working through 3 unique processes, including Tahltan's environmental assessment strategy under the Section 7 or consent agreement, an 8E, 8F assessment under Section 10 of the Nisga'a, as well as the WILP sustainability process with Gitnao. And we're doing this on the same timeline as what is the BC's environmental assessment process, right? So having the opportunity today to speak to yourselves about the importance of working with nations in collaboration, and the opportunities, which I think we're all going to share today, opportunities for innovation and new thinking as we approach project development, we should be an interesting conversation. And I will leave that there and pass it off to my colleague.
Thank you, Nalaine. Thank you for the host. This is my first time at the conference here, and so far I've heard a lot of interesting exchanges and the promotion of, and this is dear to my heart, sustainable development. I think there's a lot of things being said, but committing to sustainable development is something that is close to our values at Osisko. I'll do a brief description of our project. So Osisko got involved in the Caribou Gold project owned by Baskerville mine in Wells. I'm sure everybody knows of Wells here. Apparently, I'm not, I don't originate from BC, and when I came here, everybody told me about the Billy Barker stories and the Fred Wells, and came there. People don't realize the challenge that we're behind this project when we started, and it's essentially with the legacies issues from the past operators. So we got involved in 2016. We started and we purchased a company in 2021, and we started the EA process in 2022. But behind the scene of this project, you know, there's a small community, and there's the nations also that were there, that we started engaging even prior to start thinking about the permit. And this serves us well. Mining created wells. It created Baskerville. You know, people remember, I'm sure, this started in the 1860s, so there's been a lot of mining being done there. Our project is located underneath the town of Wells, factually, and it encompasses 3 or 4 mines that were past producer. Our project is on the traditional and unceded land of the Lataco-Dene Nations, the Atsul First Nation, and the Williams Lake First Nation. It's a bit of a complex project, and I'm sure all my colleagues are going to say every project is unique and has their own sense of complexity, and you're absolutely right. But Baskerville is special. The Caribou project is special, and it's kind of unique. When we say we're close to a community, we're not kilometers away from the community. We're in town. We're meters away from the community. You know, the deposit is underground because there's been past legacy. Our discovery is going a bit deeper and extending what has been mined in the past. How we've designed, and this is our approach at Osisko, is before we think of designing, and my background is a mining engineer, so I love designing mine and constructing and things. I got involved in the permit because I wanted to do something different, and my boss challenged me and said, Francois, we need to do things differently. If you know a bit of the history of Osisko, we've started a project in Quebec where we've moved 200 houses to do a pit that is still a mine being extracted right now, a big open pit. Caribou is different. It's an underground mine. We've committed to that in the early stage, and one thing that has always been crucial in our CEO, our big boss, Sean Rosen, is, you know, we're going to leave the land better than how we found it, because we kind of specialize in going legacy site. So we've designed the mine around, you know, listening to people and adjusting our design to meet some of the concern or reduce our impact. So our mine has 3 main components. So the mine site that's located in Wells, but we're going to do a concentrate to transport to an existing mill facility that was built by Kinross around 120 kilometers away, not to dispose of any tails close to the vicinity of Wells, using a new, I wouldn't say new technology, but a technology that serves us well. Ore sorting, that is a process that just uses mechanical separation. We're able to have no tails disposed on surface in Wells, and what is generated is used underground as backfill. The other portion that is very important for us is, you know, GHG, gas emission, reducing that. As an underground mine, we have a bit more opportunities than open pit mining, and right now, very proud, and I've talked to BC Hydro's representative yesterday. We've committed already in our EA and to the community of Wells to get most of our equipment underground, but this could be a fully electrical mine. And when I say fully, all equipment, the mine, the camp, full electricity, no hydro, no oil or gas being used there. So that's something we're pushing, and grateful that we got a grant to do a feasibility study on that, that we finished last spring, and now we're working towards that. So just to pass it on to Shannon after that, you know, even though we completed right now, and we're really proud to be the first project ever in BC to go through the new EA process, whatever type of project. We've received our certificate in October 2023. We're working towards receiving our permit for the construction this summer. We're still evolving and adjusting our design to meet some criteria and concern from the nations and our stakeholder, the community of Wells.
Thank you. And just before I provide my opening comments, I also just want to acknowledge and thank the Lheidli for their warm welcome to all of us and hosting this forum on their traditional territories. And I'm probably going to start out by saying something that you may find a little bit odd, coming from the BC government, and from a senior member in the BC government, a bureaucrat, I suppose, a lifelong bureaucrat, but I love permitting. And it's not because, well, I suppose, you know, we've heard from our premier and our ministers in the various events that they participated over in the last few days, but that they're riveted by it as well. And so I suppose when your premier and your ministers are riveted and looking at how we can take real action to improve the pace and transparency of permitting, you've got to step up and you have to love it too. Emily has a directed mandate. We have a directed mandate for faster, efficient permitting and to provide that certainty and predictability for responsible mining development. But there's also another reason why I love it, why I think how it's so important at this particular point in time, and why this directed effort with industry and nations is so important, because of just the significant opportunities that we're now seeing for critical minerals to really contribute not only to our economy, the transition of our economy to a net zero 2050, and just the opportunities for clean growth. And so I think we've all heard it, and I think our premier spoke about it on Tuesday evening as well, is that we cannot electrify our economy without critical minerals. And critical minerals are also directly connected to a net zero future, not only for British Columbia, but globally. We have a significant role to play in that. And we're all connected. We're all connected globally. I've been in this role for about a year, and so when I was asked to join the panel and to reflect, I was really reflecting on what I've learned about permitting, and that focus on what we're doing to improve it. And for me, coming back into the ministry, coming back into the natural resource sector, and seeing that significant shift, that it's not only about the process, we hear about going faster, but it's also about those values of responsible development and reconciliation, environment sustainability, building social license, and that they are core to being faster, being more efficient, and also the predictability for industry. And that's what you've heard from some of my fellow panelists today. I've sort of come up with the phrase that it's about being smart at the start, and it's about how industry, how we're all incorporating these values into all stages of the project life cycle and the permitting process. You know, the province is deeply committed to reconciliation, and as you've heard from the panelists today, just that importance of engaging early and often with First Nation right holders. And it's with that intention of building a long-term relationship and trust. And I just want to acknowledge Nalaine's passion and her knowledge, because we need to acknowledge the legacy from historical mining practices and the historic non-engagement when it comes to the natural resource sector. And so can't underscore the importance of that core value and building that trust and where that legacy is coming from. So we know that projects like the panelists today, they're leading the way, real opportunities to learn and build on that work. And really when we're starting to see when it's incorporated at all stages of a project, it's really leading to those collective benefits for First Nations, communities, and companies. BC has robust environmental standards. It's something we're proud of. It's a core value for all British Columbians. And it's not only about ensuring responsible development and protection. It's what I've sort of taken in over the last year in this new role, it's also about ensuring that we do have a mining sector that's sustainable for decades, for future generations. And it's directly connected to reconciliation. And you've heard from my colleague Lori Halls this morning about healing the land and thinking about at all stages of a project that mitigation and progressive reclamation is built in with that end in mind, with the healing of the land at all stages, and then at the end of a mine's life. Building social license, that is just ensuring that the interests of communities are addressed in the planning stages, and that benefits are flowing directly to the communities and regions. And you heard the Premier on Tuesday evening. He made a commitment to more investment in Northwest highway infrastructure. The Northwest is a critical region for critical mining development in our province. And that's directly connected to building the community support for expanded mining development in the region. And that's come from, because we've heard that not only from the Tahltan Nation, but also from industry and also from communities. And so when done right, these benefits can really transform regional economies. And I just want to give a shout out to MEBC, because this morning they released their One Province, One Economy report, and that really documents and demonstrates those benefits. So when projects are in line with responsible mine development, our system, as regulators as the province, we must be enabling to ensure that we have efficient, transparent, and that it's predictable for everyone involved. And we have and are doing significant work to make those real improvements in our permitting process. And we're seeing real results. And I'm just going to quickly highlight them, because I got to, give a shout out to my team and the hard work that I've seen them doing over the last year. We have really listened to industry, and they wanted better guidance in the application process. And so this is now in place, and we're seeing high quality applications as a result. And higher quality application means faster and more efficient review times. We've also made significant investments in technology and systems for submitting applications. So this is also leading to higher quality applications, and it means that our teams and our resources are focusing on reviewing the applications and working with industry and First Nations involved. They're not managing the paper. And we've also invested significant new resources, not only in Emily in terms of the permitting process, but also to our ministries in the natural resource sector, who are also involved in mine permitting. And this is leading to a team approach on priority projects, a one-window approach amongst our ministries. And then finally, a real shift is that we're working collaboratively now through a Deputy Minister Mining Board. I chair that with my ministry partners who are involved in permitting. And this is really contributing to real alignment across our ministries on permitting priorities, as I said, and also to really support the timely resolution of permitting issues as they come up in time. And we're seeing results. We already talked about them. The Premier sort of talked about them already on Monday evening. But we reduced the backlog of our files by 50% for regional permits since March 22. And for major mines, from the time an application is submitted to a decision, it's averaging now about 180 days. And that's down from, as I understand, before I started, about 280 days. So that doesn't mean there's more work to do. And I think we've heard particularly that work around the collaboration between ministries, the streamlining of our processes, and that will continue to be part of the next steps and the hard work we have ahead. But I think I'll leave it there, Michael.
Okay,
but
thank you, Shannon. All right, I've been a little lenient with these panelists. So here's what we're going to do, because we've got like less than about 20 minutes left. I'm going to fire some questions out. You've got a minute, so we can get as many questions, okay? And I'll cut you off, I promise. Let's go with Francois. and this is interesting because their project was the first project through the revised EA. And in that legislation, First Nations have the opportunity to provide consent or not. So for those who aren't aware, like, what does that look like in practical terms? How did that work for you guys?
For consent?
Yeah.
So, yeah, in the process, I'll try to go fast because I had certain points, but consent comes at the last minute in the process of the overall process. If you go on the website of the EAO, it's pretty clear. And EAO is going to provide a document for the minister's recommendation, and they go to nations to ask them if they're providing consent or saying without consent. When you look, and this is coming from UNDRIP declaration, and there's a couple components of consent, and this is early stage engagement. So I'll go really fast. So it needs to be free. It needs to be prior. It needs to be informed before they give consent. And this comes from the United Nations Declaration for Indigenous Nations. So if you want to have consent, even though it comes formally at the last minute, you know, we've talked about it, and it is on our side, I think, the biggest part of our success story. It was early stage and it was continuous. Just to give you an idea, we had every week a meeting with the nations and their consultant as we were going along, and we're still doing that with the permitting. So that's essential. But this is the formal one. Besides that, you need to have a parallel system for other stakeholders and even the nations on other subjects than the formal permit.
Thank you, Francois. Nalaine, you're a project proponent in kind of a first of its kind process, the Section 7 process. Can you share some learnings or observations with us on that?
Yes, thanks for the question. It's been, at this point, quite a unique opportunity. And, you know, around the consent agreement, as a proponent, one of the most important things that we can do is to ensure that the nation that is looking to do the work to get to a consent decision has the resources and the capacity to be able to do that. But the process of which the nation goes through is their own process, right? And we're starting to see that now in a number of different environmental assessment processes where nations are participating. Nations are now developing their own impact assessment frameworks based on their own values so that they can then come back and ask themselves, does this project truly provide benefit to us as a nation today and 7 generations into the future? And so with the Section 7 agreement that we're working through with the Tahltan Nation, my own nation, you know, they have their own risk assessment framework and sustainability principles of which we as a company must be taking into consideration as we develop this application. So in the work that's being done to develop the application, we are doing this in collaboration with the nation. And I know the term collaboration is different for everybody. You know, for some it might be simply doing the weekly meetings, it might be, you know, sharing reports, data, to we're doing field work and field investigations, and we have members of the nation integrated into our team, right? Don't forget, we also have to ensure that we're meeting with, you know, First Nations leaderships, the communities. We need elders' input, right? It's so different than how we would normally do an environmental assessment, where really at the end of the day, it's all about the collection of the environmental data, understanding the social impacts. No, with First Nations knowledge, information, and values, it brings a completely different and what I would call, you know, equally as an important insight into that fundamental decision whether or not a project should move ahead. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. This is good. Ryan, So your project was permitted under the old EA, and now you're in construction. So looking back, if you had a recommendation to government and or to the private sector, your partners, what could be done to streamline the permitting process? What would those be?
Yeah, maybe I'll speak to an experience we're living currently on that phase of sort of implementing conditions that bore out of our provincial EA certificate and federal approval, as well as some of the permits that we've received subsequent to that. We have a lot of crossover between those conditions of the permits and the EAs that leads to a lot of administrative burden, I would say, both for ourselves certainly. I think for government as well, in reviewing multiple documents, and certainly our nation partners review a lot of review all of those documents. And so I think taking a harder look at sort of streamlining those requirements as the authorizations are issued, so that you don't end up with this situation where you've got multiple different parties that need to be consulted on the same document and different submission requirements and that sort of thing with each step of the way. So that would be an observation of mine, is just a little bit more sort of staying in your lane as the regulatory instruments are issued for streamlining.
Thank you. A common refrain. Shannon, so you, a lot of files through your office, across your desk. You see a lot. Based on your experience, are there some kind of success factors that you see companies employing in the permitting process? What might a few of those be?
Yeah, I'm just going to get my notes here. I've talked a little bit about it already in the discussion in my intro comments about just, again, the importance of those the core values and being smart at the start. But really one of the things that we've learned as we continue to improve our processes, and I suppose when we talk about best practices in the applications that we're seeing, and just that importance of engaging early and often, and that proactive and collaborative engagement work with nations at every step of the mine development process, and then addressing their concerns as much as possible in the design process. Another, I think, key learning is just really being realistic. And it's really about the timing of applications, being realistic on the timing based on, reasonable expectations of the time that it takes to collect really complex information, develop the applications, to move them through the permitting process itself. One of the things that we've seen as well is that companies hire a lot of experts to help them with this work. And so experience and expertise, it really matters. And you really ensuring that you're engaging with experienced and knowledgeable technical professionals. Because cutting corners or not engaging in that type of expertise, again, it really has an impact, I think, on the quality of the applications. We've seen that. And then just at the end of the day, really providing quality applications, bringing in the comprehensive applications that they address all of the type of things we've already discussed, how you've incorporated those core values into the process, and really recognizing the impacts to the nations on the lands that you propose operating, and how all that engagement and that consensus and consultation has been brought into the process along the way is so key. And again, that's just really robust responses, so that we really see how the project is going to be responding not only to the interests of the of the First Nation right holders, but also the responses to the communities and regions in terms of the social license considerations that I also highlighted in my introduction. So I think those are really, yeah, I think that's a really highlights what the learnings, like the learnings, and this is a continuous process. And the opportunity from this panel today is part of that process. We're having these discussions all the time, and as we learn new things, we're bringing that back into the process. That's how we're getting better, getting faster, more predictable.
Okay, thank you. I think we've heard through this conference commentary on the ability or making sure that nations have capacity to go through the process. The Mining Association has said publicly that we feel the Crown has an obligation to ensure nations have that capacity, and we've made recommendations on various measures that could be taken. But I want to ask Nalaine, because you've talked about this, tell us or share with us your perspective on capacity, please.
Thanks for the question. You know, as someone who has spent 15 plus years working for First Nations across the country, and looking, you know, specifically at the responsibilities that nations now have with regards to these permits and making decisions, you know, a level of capacity that's required for us to be able to meaningfully participate in this process, I would say, is getting to the place where it's on par or equivalent to what we're seeing through the regulatory technical advisory committees. So many of the nations are bringing qualified professionals to the table today. But if I can, for a moment, talk a little bit about the Tahltan Nation. You know, when we created the Tahltan Heritage Resources Environmental Assessment Team, you know, we very purposefully, with the direction of our leadership and elders, ensured that our own Tahltan knowledge and Tahltan knowledge holders and keepers were part of that process. So we blended, you know, Western science and Tahltan knowledge from the outset. So we have to remember and be mindful that nations are doing the work required to bring that technical capacity to the table, but they also have to bring, you know, their own knowledge to ensure that when they're making a decision about this application, they're making the decision in the best interests of the nation and reflecting on the nation's rights, interests, on their values and relationship, right?
Thank you. Our time is ticking away here, so what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of you in like about 30 seconds each to tell the audience what you think they need to know about permitting today. Starting with Ryan.
Where to start? Oh my goodness, 30 seconds. I mean, I've heard it from the panelists here, that early engagement and talking about the project before you even have lines, words on a page, that sort of thing at the outset is absolutely critical. So if I could make a recommendation to anyone, it would be to start building those relationships and start that engagement at a very, very early age, and do it in a really meaningful and deep way, so that there's that spirit of collaboration that starts right from day one. I think that sets proponents up for the best outcomes as they go through their multi-year plus journey of permitting a mine.
Thank you, Ryan. Francois?
I agree totally with Ryan. It starts early and meaningful. It's important, I say truthful, honest, transparent. And one thing I would say for the permitting, it is a long process. Whatever we're trying to improve the timeline, I would, you know, the new process here in BC is very clear, and it has the legislated timeline, and they've been respected in our case, even though we went through the COVID period. One thing that I would say to add to that, I think that when we're consulting with stakeholders and with the nations, we had a talk about that is, you know, you're consulting, you're listening, but we need to have a bit of openness from the regulators that if we want to change, adjust, or design anything in our mine, that it won't penalize us on the timeline of the permit. We're asked to be consulting, to be meaningful, but when you need to change because it was assessed that it is a change, maybe sometimes required or asked, unfortunately, we're still penalized, and it increases the timeline substantially. We're not talking only months, it could be years. So I think for people to be well prepared and coming to Shannon, the quality, don't underestimate the people you're going to work with. You're going to work with for a long time, assess them, and be well prepared before you start. So gather a lot of information and create those relations before. My background again is engineering. Before you start thinking of designing, have those set up, and this is going to be your backbone for being successful with the permitting.
Thank you, Francois. What I hear there is a need for more further flexibility. Nalaine.
I will leave you with Indigenous consent and really reflecting on what that means. So between the province and between Indigenous governments, there is opportunity there for real shared decision-making. And I think in reflecting on that, there is a further opportunity for us to maybe perhaps work towards streamlining this process. Thanks.
Thank you. Shannon?
I'm going to repeat what I said earlier in my introductions, being smart at the start. And permitting is just not about process. It's not about transaction. It's about demonstrating the core values that each of the panelists today in their projects have really demonstrated in the work that they're doing: reconciliation, their environment, sustainability, social license. And when those core values are integrated from the start and at all cycles of the project, the permitting process in terms of predictability, efficiency, it goes hand in hand with that. I also want to leave you with that permitting, it's just, again, not about process. I believe the changes and the innovations and the work that we're doing, it's directly connected to our competitive advantage as a sector. And because when you have that permit, you have certainty, you have predictability, and it's something that when we look over the next 5 years as the transition to green is growing, shareholders are looking for that in terms of the companies that they're investing in, supporting, and our key trading partners are now looking at that in terms of the products that they're importing into their countries. And so permitting is connected into that, and maybe we never really thought about it that way, but it is. It's fundamentally connected. And I started off by saying I love permitting, and I'm going to end by saying permitting rocks.
Thank you, Shannon. Brian, Nalaine, Francois, Shannon, thanks very much. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today and to share your perspectives. And I want to thank the C3 Alliance team, and thank our sponsor, WSP. Have a good day.
All right, we're going to ask our panel. Yep, applause, please. You just relax for a little bit because I'm going to ask Al Leonard, Executive Vice President, Capital Infrastructure Project Delivery with BC Hydro, to come to the stage and give a warm thank you to the panel. Al?
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to open up and provide my thanks to the Clay Dene for hosting us today for this forum, but also for the panel and for hosting us on their traditional territory. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank our panelists here today and to thank them for coming together and to share their thoughts and their perspectives on permitting for sustainable development. I'd also like to thank Michael for doing an excellent job of keeping everybody together and really doing a great job of moderating. What I took away from today is really There are many opportunities in front of us in the mining sector. And there are opportunities to innovate, so to do things differently, learn from the past, opportunities for collaboration and partnerships amongst First Nations, amongst industry, and amongst government regulators, opportunities for reconciliation, to listen, to learn, to implement First Nations knowledge and perspectives into decision-making, permitting, and ultimately into the projects. And finally, what I heard from everyone here today was a commitment to harness these opportunities for a clean and sustainable growth in the mining sector. So the mining sector is very important to BC Hydro. In fact, as a single industry, it is our largest industrial load. BC Hydro is very committed to working with mining customers, as we are with all of our customers, to look for opportunities to electrify processes and equipment, and as we look to make that clean energy transition. So as we heard today, there are a lot of opportunities, and it's up to all of us to harness those and to work together. So thanks so much for all of you for attending, and I hope everyone enjoys the final day of the forum and we all get home safely. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Can I ask you to help? We're going to do the consummate group photo. Jennifer, please join us up here as our introducer person. Oh, you can bring friends, absolutely. Folks, I'm pleased to say it's your turn to have a stretch break. We'll reconvene for our next panel. Oh, yeah. At 10 after 11, you're going to hear the bell. Oh, sure. Lots of friends. Oh, good, good, good. WSP Canada. I'll tell you, what a team. Come on up, you guys. Stretch break. Listen to the bell, or for the bell, sorry, 11:05, and our next panel will get going at 10 after 11. Thanks so much, folks.